Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Drunken Tarrasque.
Where we strongly suggest that you do not attempt to walk through the gelatinous cube. Just a PSA.
Yes. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it's one of those things that Rachel brought to my attention, and kind of what I've seen with a lot of talks about role-playing, is that no one actually, I feel, properly defines it, or they wave it off. And it may sound... I don't mean to be talking down to you, but I think we should be talking about what is role-playing as a whole. And I've never seen really any good DMs actually properly talk about it, and a lot of the bad games I've been through, I've seen so many of them not actually understand what role-playing is.
Mm-hmm. And I think the best way to define it is to say that, well, I mean, at its base core is you're creating a character, and then you're acting out that character. I mean, it is anywhere between light acting to heavy acting.
Yeah. I make the joke... I usually make the joke that it's playing pretend with rules, and it's essentially a multiplayer experience. That is how I look at it at Space Core, and Rachel has her way of putting it. And that is kind of where a lot of people with role-playing, this is why I feel a lot of bad sessions happen with so many people, is we don't look at it as the multiplayer experience of building a character, telling a communicative story. Even though the DM has a lot of control, it's just that everyone starts going single-player-itis, this is me doing this, and they rush off forward.
And when you're playing role, it's important to think about where you are in the team, what your role is.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's incredibly important because, there's support. So the folks who are in the background.
May I squeeze in for 1 second?
Okay.
Actually, here's the thing. I would break it down into 3 parts, and Rachel's actually describing one of those parts, I would say. I call it the character, the duty, and the class, and I would argue Rachel right now is depicting the duty, and which is essentially what other people is your role in the game.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on is it's important to understand what your character class, what your role is in combat. So you've got folks who are in the back; those are usually support. And then you've got people who are in the middle, and then you've got people who are out front. The people who are out front usually have strong defense across the. They're gonna get higher hit points.
Yeah,
they're gonna have better armor.
Yeah, across all editions or any role-playing systems.
Yeah, and yeah, they have the advantage of all the advantages that are going to make them. They're going to make it a good tank in the front. So you got your tank in the front, then you got your people in the middle. So they've got probably anywhere between spells or like some kind of special ability that they're going to take up the middle space. And then there's people in the back who are usually healing or giving inspiration as a bard or something.
Yeah. And this is kind of how Rachel and I look at this, and the reason why I say the duty, the role, is that this is one of the things I feel is one of the more flexible aspects of role-playing, because, for example...
Yes.
Yeah. For example, I have a character, Tea Leaf. He's an assassin. The other 2 aspects of him are more rigid, but in different situations with a different group of people, he may just be a simple scout. He may be a person who is more inclined to forging documents. Or in the game that I had been playing under Rachel, he was essentially DPS and support, which was just damage. He's a heavy damage dealer, and that's kind of the role you play is one of the most flexible and constantly evolving, because even in a situation of, let's say, one of my party members is down, my role can ultimately quickly shift on a dime. It's one of those the things that you got to think about, and I feel those 2 have 2 supporting pillars to how you actually have your set role in the game, is the character and the class. And Rachel was talking about how you have clerics and wizards, and the class is, even though and there are some games that are classless, you do have a tendency to create archetypes like a cleric, like a healer, like a bruiser.
Mhm.
So I always say, like, yeah, classes is essentially an easy, quick, unifying form to call it.
This is the most basic of
Yeah.
what we're dealing with. And the reason why I bring these things up is you have to figure out, like, if you're in combat, are you the one who just, runs in there screaming Leroy Jenkins, or are you the person who stands behind that dumbass, or are you the person who's helping these people handle the whole situation by casting heal spells or buffing? Or are you the sneaky person in the shadows waiting for the opportune moment to stab somebody in the back?
Exactly. Exactly. Like,
Holy hell.
yeah, and this is why with role playing, I do suggest to anyone who starts out new, class systems are your friend. I've had some DMs who don't like classes, and there's nothing wrong with not having your first game start off with classes, but it helps you understand the other aspects of role playing. Because if you know your class, let's say I choose one of my Matthias, who is a fighter, it will help you actually build the character, his personality, because you do have to think on, okay, if I choose a guy who's a fighter, is this a guy who served in the military? Is this a guy who's been a guard? Or is this just kind of guy who's been a punk? Your classes do help you evolve and create your characters and inform a way to roleplay with the other players. And, yeah.
I will say, though, I do have a little bit of problems with the D&D system, and I'll explain in a moment. But because when we're looking at things like the basics of acting, like even if you look at what actors say about getting into character and everything like that, and of course we do have the difference between an incredibly light role-play campaign, or people who are just going to go in there and hack and slash, in a very, very heavy role-play heavy system or game. But what they tell you in the basics of acting and getting into character is that characters are not so much their skills, but their mannerisms and their habits. And so you have to think about, well, what kind of person is this? What do they do on their downtime? What do they do when they're not fighting? Those things are incredibly important to helping you be able to get into character. Do they have an accent? Do they have like a minor vice or something? Like do they smoke a pipe, for example? Or just little things like that. Or if they're in their downtime, do they grab a stick and start whittling? These different things help you to start getting into the mind of your character for a more role-play heavy kind of session.
Yeah, and the reason why Rachel talks about D&D and says, here's the thing, D&D is great for role-playing, but it does not have a easy setup for people who are completely new.
Yeah, if you don't know... If you don't know anything about this stuff, you wouldn't know where to begin to go for a more role-play heavy thing, which is why I prefer the L5R system.
Yeah, L5R, Legend of the Five Rings for those guys out there. I have the 4th edition right in my hands, and I could easily say go to page 100 and 101, and it has a list, actually even 102, it has a list of 20 questions at basic to start out to flush out your character. And this is one of those things that I have to say, why try many different systems to figure out which system is right for you with role-playing and understand what role-playing is? Because even if you do not enjoy one role-playing system, let's say you just stick to D&D the rest of your life, different editions, different systems will help you make better characters, because just even picking out it, to whom does your character owe the most loyalty to? That's an actual important question, even for any character in any universe. A lot of these questions, some of them are specific, but these are these questions that will help you build a character that comes to life. And that when you start looking at it, you start realizing your character, you really get a lot to it. Let me double check.
And they might seem like things that don't matter, but they really do help you get into the idea of who this person is and how they differ from you. So like when I think about some of my characters, like my character Shizuka, she's actually very sneaky. She's not being particularly honest, but she's not a terrible person. You have to think she's kind of charismatic, and and uses that charisma to get out of things to achieve certain ends. And I've got other characters, but that's just giving an idea. And all of that took a lot of research on my part. I went above and beyond for that character. I haven't gotten to play her yet, but it's I'm waiting for it.
Yes. Well, here's the other thing is with your character, and this is I would argue the three aspects. Your character is that you can build your character ahead of time, and I'll go in further detail of the three other sets, the two sets of styles of role-playing character building, but one of the other things is realize you can build your character throughout the game, and in little ways. One of my characters, Rin, when I was playing a Pathfinder game, was always nat 20 against undead, so I made him, role-playing wise, character-wise, I developed him to have a hate and disdain for the undead. And this is one of those things is that when you're playing a D&D-like game or any of these role-playing games, take into consideration your rolls. If you're rolling exceptionally well against a creature, ask your DM if it's okay, hey, can I have this be a creature I hate, and instill this as part of the story, because the longer you play these characters, these characters will grow. Remember, they're not real, but they will grow, and you can actually give them more depth. The character aspect of role-playing, I argue, is a more flexible area. You can set out your core, he's born here, he's from here, he has this type of faith.
They're not this kind of finite thing. The thing to really emphasize is that all of these things that you're picking out when you're building your character from the get-go and you've got their stats on a page, those things are finite. But who your character is going to be, like you were talking about, from decisions that they make and things they encounter, they're going to change. And to go for a more authentic experience, you should have them change based on those experiences. Every single thing that happens to a regular human being, something about them changes. A reaction occurs. And this is just basic acting method that we're talking about here.
And this is why when you play these games, building your character, role-playing with people, remember this: other people can help build your character. Tea Leaf, actually I have to say, to date, he's my favorite character. He would never have had the personality if it wasn't for me joking around with my friend Brandon about... yeah, Rachel already knows.
Eventually you'll get to meet him. We'll bring him on here eventually. Yes.
But essentially, when it came down to Tea Leaf, I started acting silly with him about how he lived in Brandon's backpack. And the whole idea is, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it got really weird.
Yeah, he's a tiny little halfling that lives inside of the backpack. It's great.
But that's the thing, is that if I didn't joke around with my friend, I wouldn't have grafted to that idea that I started saying to Rachel, she was the DM at the time, can I make him smaller? Make him more, like, petite and stuff like that.
More compact.
Yes.
Can you make him travel size?
Yes, can I make... for convenience. And essentially build a friendship with Brandon's character that I was essentially...
Who's a dwarf.
Who's a dwarf. That was essentially, hey, Brandon's character's hungry. You see this little hand slide out of the backpack and feed the dwarf. This is... Here's the thing. It would never have happened. This is why, when you build characters, a community effort is not a bad thing. It's one of the reasons why I don't like Adventures League. You do not get that organic character building, because a single character, you can build up any character in lickety-split in any of these games, but when you have other people putting some input, it can kind of make them three-dimensional.
Yes.
It can make them a living character.
It's incredibly important. I actually think it's a really great idea to really build your character with other people, at least the preliminary stuff, because then you can toss ideas back and forth like Mike was talking about, and you can think of like, oh, that would be really funny, or that would be awesome. I would really enjoy that. So it should be this group process, because you should never try and create a character that's just not gonna it's not gonna go well with the rest of the group, or that's gonna be like incredibly difficult. Like one time we were beginning a campaign, and one person wanted us to stop and convince him to role play.
Convince
him to go with us into town.
And this is the reasons why building a character together with a group of people, you can already work some of that stuff out. It's why Brandon Example, another thing he suggests when you start doing roleplay, what is roleplay is one dry run. And this is why you can start then figuring out if this is how you want your character to be. And this is kind of the bigger things, is that the experience, and the bigger other thing is with role playing, you have a DM, and he can set the tone and give personality to the world and characters. And this is why these building things, these little things, and understanding what role playing is that this DM interacts with the players, and it goes back and forth. And this is why you have to understand this is a multiplayer experience. This is everyone is included in the storytelling, because if you do not, your games will completely, in due time, become either boring, monotonous, or fall apart.
And fun. And here's the tip. Here's a wonderful set of tips I'm going to give you, because I think that those of you who have listened, should get this leg up. If you don't know already, what we're talking about with L5R, all the questions, give you something like, was it like 40 questions or more?
It starts off with 20 questions and then gives you another 20.
Yeah, it's something like 40 questions. But all of these questions are the sort of things that you can find in writer's guides. Like there'll be like 20 questions or something for creating your character. You can find these all over the internet. However, I will still be posting a lot of character building tips on our Twitter at a drunk Tarrasque on Twitter.com.
Yes, it is one of those weird names. Yes, we were not high when we created this.
Oh, we like to have fun.
Exactly. And what is understanding about role playing is that take your time, you have fun with it, because guess what? This type of thing, it can easily build relationships, build friendships, and it's inevitably about fun. So
yes, always remember, it's first and foremost about fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
Or it might not be for you. And there's nothing wrong with it. And this is why anyone can roleplay. But if it's not your cup of tea, this is why when you understand what role-playing is, some people just don't work well with a group of people. And that's why a lot of people need to realize it's multiplayer, the DM has a lot of power, and if you don't like the DM having a lot of power and you have a problem with that, might not be the game for you or the system for you. This is not meant to be any derogatory. Play a video game. You'll have you'll still be having similar enjoyments.
Some people, I think, are more. They're going to be better for playing a video game instead. However, I wouldn't just immediately assume that you're not going to be good for it, because sometimes you can just have a bad DM or a bad group that you might need. I'm saying you might need something else. Like my older D&D group and DM did not actually allow much in the way of role play. It was not really as encouraged. Everybody was just kind of like a murder hobo. So it's like go in there, stab, 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 and min-max. And so I didn't really get to play like I wanted to. But once I actually I met our wonderful DM Mike here and our older group, I actually had a better chance to actually engage in roleplay, and that was actually a great deal of fun, and I have a blast.
Yeah, and ultimately, give it a few tries, try different groups, and with role-playing, there's many different styles. We lean towards the encouragement of a more role-playing system, and for me, and I feel this is something that all good DMs to understand, what about role-playing, what is role-playing, is you come up with good ideas. You come up with ideas or lore or stories that are good. You just let them flow out. You just let them happen, and you just have it happen. Because I've seen too many DMs step their foots on this, and squashing on your players' desires and dreams is not about that. It's about working together to tell the story.
And remember, it's a role-playing game. It's not just stab, stab, stab. I would say that roleplay is the heart and soul of D&D and all of the tabletop games. I would say it is the thing that the game is honestly about. Because when people talk about trying to win at D&D, it's absurd. The whole idea is you're getting to have a good time with your friends. That is the goal of D&D. It's not necessarily to just
Win.
to stab the heck out of everything that arises and try to beat the DM. That's
and,
not.
and that's one of the other things about understanding about what's role playing is that never try to beat the DM, because everyone forgets a couple important factors. Usually it's your friend who's the DM, so you're essentially trying to undercut the DM. And second, the DM is God. He can just wave his hand and kill you. This is very important factors that many people, when figuring out what role-playing is, they forget that DM is God, and that's your friend who's essentially being God.
Yeah,
so
but
work with them.
It's also your buddy, and so it's. But also, again, it's your buddy, and sometimes you may not realize that your buddy is a dick until
Yes.
until you're playing underneath him as a DM.
Yes, it's quite telling when you play as a DM. You start seeing things in a different manner, and remember,
You don't know people until you play with them. You really do not. You think you know the people that you're with. You think you know who your friends are until you actually play D&D with the. Oh gosh, like Mike, you should tell them how what happened with your family when they played with you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this will be the closing out story time about what it is to be role-playing. Role-playing is all about having fun and letting what happens and not being overly serious. It's one of the biggest factors to realize. My mother played a Dragonborn. My sister played an assassin. My mother burnt down an old lady's house, threatened her with magic to burn her alive for not giving her information, and then charmed her into saying she's so beautiful and pretty, why don't you help us? And Nat 20'd everything.
Beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes down to role-playing, it's about having fun. And I had said in that session, when we said this is just about having fun, be as crazy as you want, you start realizing when you say that line, that means anything can happen.
Yeah, apparently your mom wants to set people on fire.
Yes, and well, my sister, my fault, I forgot to tell her she could fly, critically failed her acrobatics checks and face planted into a wall, breaking the character's nose. This is why, yes, here's the thing, my sister's a wonderful player. This is why I say, what's about role-playing? What is role-playing? It's having fun with people. Basic argument is just have fun with people, because guess what? After that session, may have been a while before we had time to play another game, but they were wanting another game. And why? It was all about fun.
Yeah, and if you focus on the fun, it's not going to matter how bad things get or how difficult the situation.
Or who forgets healing spells.
Hey, that only happened the one time.
Yes, and thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to us. And as Rachel said, that only happened one time, but these are stories you will remember months later on. Maybe, depending on how much fun you had in a game, it may be years later you remember these stories. So, always have fun. Take these games in stride. It's about having fun.
Get into character.
Get into character, and Godspeed, and have fun. Good night.
Night, everybody.